Hello, welcome back to my reloading bench. Today you can see that I'm holding a case in my hand, 44 Remington Magnum. I have 6 pieces of brass, and today's video is going to be focused on that caliber. Some things that you'll need for the reloading process I have here on my bench, but first is first, and that's your safety glasses. Make sure that you always wear good, clean safety glasses without obstructions so you can see clearly what you're doing. Some things that you'll need for the reloading process today are going to be primers. We're going to be using Winchester large pistol primers. Some dies. Today we're going to be using Rcbs 44 mag dies. These are vintage dies from 1967. You're going to need some powder. Powder today is made by a Lyman called Unique. It's a very good shotgun powder. However, we're going to be using it for 44 mag today. You'll need some bullets. Today we're using the Hornady 180 grain with the cantilever hollow point. Really good bullet. You'll need some sort of case lube. I have 2 of them laid out in front of you. I have the Dillon case lube, which is one of my favorites, and I really like it because you can see right there by my thumb it contains 2 things. It has lanolin and it has isopropyl alcohol. And I really like the way this works. What happens is you spray this onto your cases, and the alcohol is what's used as a propellant to put the lanolin onto the cases. And then you leave them there for a few minutes. You walk away, you come back, and the alcohol will be dried away, and what's left behind will be the lanolin. If you want to try to find some of this, you can get it at the Dillon store in Scottsdale, or you can go to their website. Another lube that I like to use, and I might actually use this today, I'm not sure, but this is the Unique Case Lube by Hornady. It's really good stuff. Kind of reminds me of a wax. I don't know if I can open it. I'm using one hand for the camera here. But it's a good lube. It's a real waxy, kind of reminds me of chapstick or something. A little thinner though, but it works good. I recommend you have a pencil and paper. I'll get to that in a minute. Screwdriver. I'm going to be using this to clean my primer pockets. A set of calipers to measure things, digital or the dial type, doesn't matter. Lee autoprime tool I'm going to be using with the corresponding shell holder. I like to have a flashlight available, a case neck mouth brush, a deburring tool, a scale to weigh my powder charges with the bowl, a scoop, and a funnel. And in this container I already have some Unique powder in here. So I don't never put my fingers in the powder, because my fingers, they have oils in them and I don't want those oils to get into the powder. So that's why I use that scoop. This little bowl is plastic, and I actually prefer a metal bowl because sometimes the flake powders will stick to this bowl, but to kind of make that not as bad, I use a dryer sheet on all my plastic stuff, like my funnel and my bowl, and that tends to help a lot with keeping things from sticking, as far as powder sticking to the plastic. Now at this point you're going to need some sort of load data. You see my book over there, but in this case the powder that we're using, a lot of powders, not all of them, but a lot of them, you can go to their website, and in our case, Alliant powder, they have some very good load data on their website. So depending on what size bullet you're using and stuff, sometimes that load data will work for you, and then other times it won't. You'll have to find a different source, but nonetheless, you know, the website has good information. You can also go to the IMR powder website. They have some very good load data there. But in our case today, we're going to be getting our load data out of a book. And I really like this Lyman 49th edition. That's the load data that we're going to use today. You can also get the Lee book, but to be honest, and I like the Lee book, I'm not knocking it, but to be honest, I like this Lyman better, because to me the Lee seems a lot more conservative on how hot you can load your bullets. Lyman lets you go a little further. With that being said, though, about load data and experience and things like that, I want to make sure that you understand that I'm not a reloading expert. Now, I have been doing this for a long time, reloading, but I'm just sharing information with you that works for me, techniques that I use that work for me. I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong. I'm just saying this is what I do and it works for me. I need you to be careful, and I recommend highly that you go out and you do your own load data research. Make sure you find, you know, go to whatever sources you need to. Even though I'm going to be sharing data with you, it's up to you to verify that data from my video or any video that you see on the internet for that matter. So make sure that you verify this data. This is good data, but it works for me. It might not work for you. I don't know. So one more thing that I didn't mention is the press. Obviously we need to have a press. Today we're going to be using the Lee very inexpensive press. In my opinion, it does a great job. I've been using it for a lot of different calibers and works great. So that's a rough look as to some of the components that you'll need to load this cartridge. Okay, I have my Lyman 49th edition in front of me. What I'd like to do is open the book up and share some load data with you. So we're looking at 44 mag. Here's my paper. Remember, I said we need a paper and a pencil, and I'll explain that in a second. A couple things that you need to note are the trim length, 1.2850, or excuse me, 1.285, and that would be from the tip of the brass to the bottom of the brass, and the overall length, 1.610, from the tip of the bullet to the base of the brass. Now, we want to look one step further because the trim length has a different trim length written down here, and even though it says 1.285, that might be after the crimp is done. So let's look here. 1.275 is our trim length. So make sure you catch that, 1.275 trim. The primers, large pistol primers, is what we're going to be using today, and we're going to be using the 44 Magnum 180 grain hollow point. 1.610 is the overall length. The powder, they give you a list of powders that you can use. However, in our case, we're using Unique. So the very top one, they will give you a starting suggested load of 12 grains and a max load of 13.6 grains. So make sure that when you build your loads, that you build them between the 12.0 and the 13.6. Don't go above 13.6 and don't go below 12.0. So you could have 12.4, 13.0, anything like that within this range will be good. So basically, I take all that data that I just read out of my book and I write it down on a piece of paper. The cartridge that I'm loading today, 44 Magnum, Winchester large pistol primers. Remember these guys. 180 grain Hornady jacketed hollow point. Again, there's our bullets. Unique powder. Again, make sure that you're having all the correct stuff. 12.0 to 13.6. I've circled the 12.0 because that's what we're going to load the charge today. Trim length 1.275, even though on the chart it said 0.85, 1.285, but then it said 1.275, so we'll trim to that length. Overall length 1.610, and we should get approximately 1,061 feet per second at 12 grains of powder. So now we're going to be referring to this load data off of this paper several times during this video. Okay, so I have my 6 cases in front of me. First step of this process is to check these cases and make sure that there's no problems with them, that the primers aren't bulging, that there's no splits or tears during the body of the case. Kind of spin them around, make sure that there's no tears down here, so that any time that I handle these cases at any point during the reloading process, it's an inspection. I'm checking the primers to make sure they're not bulging, because if they were, that would be an indicator that we might have had some hot loads or something like that. So we don't want to get any loads that are too hot. You know, you're wanting to look for signs of weakness or fatigue in the brass. And in our case, everything looks okay. Now this brass hasn't been tumbled. It's been cleaned, but it hasn't been tumbled. But I think it's good enough for a video today. I generally like my brass a little bit cleaner, but that's more of a personal preference. It doesn't really have anything to do with the function of the brass. So now, at this point, I've done my quick inspection. It's time to lube that brass. So what I'd like to do is take like a little napkin. I'm going to lay the napkin down on the table, and I'm just going to lay my brass down on the napkin, and I'm going to give them a quick shot of DCL. Just a couple little squirts, roll them a little bit, and then they're going to sit there. They'll have time to dry, the alcohol. So I'll move them out of the way. And while they're drying, I'll talk about inserting my shell holder and my dies. Okay, again, we're using 1967 Rcbs 44 mag dies. There's 3 dies in this set. There's the decapping die, which is noted by the little pin, the decapping pin. This is what we're going to go ahead and install into the press. I'll get back to that in a second. The next thing that you'll need, very important, is your shell holder. This shell holder has a little groove on the bottom, and that's very, very needed when you're going to be putting this into your press. There's other types of shell holders that are available on the market. These happen to be made by Lee, and they don't have the groove on the bottom, so they won't fit in your press. What these shell holders are for is for the Lee autoprime tool. They sit in there, you know. And another thing I want to note is down inside here where the number is, it says number 3. There's a sizing chart depending on what kind of what cartridge you're going to load and what shell holder you need. But this area right here is all one area, and I'll explain it on this other one a little bit. This Rcbs shell holder, you notice this area right here is recessed a little bit, and the reason they do that is because if you did have a primer that was bulging a little bit or something, you know, you could still remove the case from the shell holder. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to stress though is make sure that you buy the type that has this groove. That'll fit into your press. So here we go, we got our press. Raise the ram a little bit, and we'll put the corresponding groove into that ram of the press. And it just takes a little push with your thumb. Snaps into place, and we're ready to go. From here, what I want to do is I want to raise the ram all the way up, and I want to thread this die down until the die body comes in contact with the shell holder. So turn it down until it touches the shell holder. These two surfaces right here are going to meet. When that happens, then I'm good. So I have it tightened down, At this point, I'm going to tighten the lock ring. I really like these lock rings here. I believe they're made by Redding. I'm not sure, but I think they're made by Redding. Now at this point, I've got my decapping die installed. I'm going to get my cases again, and they're dry now to the touch. Insert the case into the press, into the ram, and I'm going to slowly raise the ram. Now these old dies, the tolerances for the entry of the bullet into the die, into the bottom of the die, are tighter than today's modern dies. This old die, they're a lot tighter back then. So if you have a case that's out of round, you know, it's like not totally round, sometimes you might have difficulty with these older dies. So I raised the ram, and what's happened is I just resized the full length vertically of this brass all the way down till the lip down here. I've resized this full length, and the spent primer, I just knocked it out. So that's the first one. It's all done. Again, I resized it and I knocked out the spent primer. What I like to do here is I like to take my screwdriver and clean the primer pockets to get rid of any of the carbon. They make a primer pocket uniforming tool. It's a really good tool, works great. I'll probably end up getting one sometime. So that piece of brass is all done. And I just basically repeat the process on all of these. So I'm decapping and resizing, and a quick primer pocket clean just to get that carbon out. If you were to skip this primer pocket cleaning step, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's not really a necessary step. I like to do it, but some people don't. It's not that big of a deal. But you will get a little bit of carbon out of there, and it'll clean it up, and you'll have a little easier time seating your primers. See? It's nice and clean in there. So I'm going to repeat, get all 6 of these done. This little press, this Lee, I say this in probably every video I make, but I'm very fond of this little press. It's so light and easy to use, and it does a good job. But if you're the kind of person that needs a lot of torque and you like cranking on things hard and stuff like that, this ain't the press for you. This is the press for somebody who has a lot of patience and doesn't get in a hurry, and you know, if something binds up, you know, this kind of person would look at the situation and see what the problem is. I know some people, they like a lot of torque on their press, and if something binds, they just push harder, and I don't know. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm very patient when I reload. Another thing I want to mention while I'm on the subject of decapping is you noticed that I lubed my cases. And on a lot of the dies that you see out today in the market, people don't need to lube their cases because the dies are carbide. But in our case, I still like to lube my cases. It's not going to hurt them to lube them. And at this point, I'm just wiping off any excess lube that might have been on the cases. If you choose to put dirty brass into your dies, like I've watched videos on YouTube of people just putting dirty brass in their dies, I don't think that's the best idea, because if there's pieces of dirt or anything on the side of the brass, not only will it scratch your brass, but it'll also have the potential to scratch the inside of your dies. And when that happens, once you scratch that inside of the die, every piece of brass that you put in there after that is going to scratch too, because your die has a defect on it. So just use the lube. It's not going to hurt anything. At this point, I'm going to take a little air. I'm just going to blow these out. You don't have to do this. I'm just something I like to do. I'll probably do this step again in a minute after I trim. It's it's not necessary. Get into those primer pockets a little bit. A lot of people at this point would think, oh, now I can prime them. I don't think you should prime them yet, because we have to expand the case mouths. And if you prime them first and then you expand the case mouths, meaning, because right now the bullet won't fit in there, so we have to bell the mouth open a little bit so it'll accept a bullet. If you prime the cases at this point in your operation and then you bell the mouths of the cases, the pressure, the air that's built up inside this case as you bell the mouth might be enough to unseat your primer a little bit. So I always wait till after I do that belling step to prime my cases. Okay, I just got finished decapping, resizing, everything's clean, and now I'm gonna take, and you're gonna look at this a little different because it has a decapping pin also, but this is a very unique case mouth expansion die that I use. So I'm gonna expand the case mouths. I have to uninstall the decapping die, and I'm going to install the case mouth expansion die, because like I said earlier, this is a necessary step so that I can insert a bullet in there. So you notice I took the belling insert out and I'm lowering everything. See, this says 44 special, but I use it for the mags also. What'll happen is the case will come in here. See if I can get it. Anyway, as the case rides up, it'll get to this area right here, and you can see how the brass, or excuse me, this steel kind of bevels out right here, and that's the area where I'm going to start to expand the case mouth. And it has another decapping pin. Sometimes I would actually skip the first die and just go straight to the second die if I'm like in a rush to get some bullets out. I would do that sometimes. So again, the die body's coming down until it comes in contact with the shell holder. Right there, lock the lock ring. And I love these knurled lock rings because you don't have to have a wrench. Raise it up, see it's perfectly clear. There's nothing in the way. So I'm going to start threading this case mouth expansion down. You'll feel it biting, and you want to make very small adjustments. Don't be doing like full turn here. Do like a half a turn. You'll feel it, and you'll notice it. You'll feel it in the handle here. So I'm just taking that piece and I'm going a little bit more at a time until I feel it. You know, you could also thread it down here until you feel it stop. Once you feel it stop, then you're at the mouth of the case, and from here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. From here you can go like, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch turns and do it, and then inspect the case. See, we're not quite there yet. So let's go another little 1/8 of a turn. You don't want to make big adjustments because these adjust very quickly. And if you make an adjustment too quick, you might go from not having anything to having way too much. Now that is very close, but I want just a tad more, so I'm going to go like, I went like maybe a 30-second. Raise, down, and inspect. I just want it to drop in there. I don't want it loose, I just want it barely in there. That's perfect. Another reason, and from here I have this set, so I want to hold this and lock this little lock ring. You don't want this turning in and out as you lock the lock ring because you'll be changing your adjustment there. Okay, so there, that first one's ready. Basically going to repeat with all of these and just verify real quick that the bullet does fit. If you go too excessive on this belling step, you're actually going to be hurting the life of your brass because you're working the brass too much. So you want just barely enough bell, not too much. Yeah, that's perfect. Oops. Brass flying all over. These look great. So the key word earlier was small adjustments. You don't want to get too fast on your adjustments, otherwise you'll be doing way more than you need. So that's good. All these cases have been, the case mouths have been expanded, which leads us to the next step of trimming the brass. Okay, just for another reference, I want to look at my trim length, and it's 1.275 inches. Trim 1.275. Now today I have the Lyman universal trimmer sitting here, and what happens is you have a chuck that you put your brass in. So basically the brass fits into this chuck, and then you rotate the chuck up, and the pilot goes into the brass. I don't like to tighten it until the pilot goes in. I like the pilot to go in to get started, and then I'll tighten the brass. From here you rotate this handle, and this cutter will trim the brass to the length that you set it. What'll happen, you'll be able to tell when you're finished trimming, because this ring will bottom out against this body of the trimmer, and it won't be able to go forward anymore. When that happens, that's when you're done trimming. You'll be removing material from the brass. From there, you undo it, and if you look at a case that has not been trimmed, and you reference it to one that has, the one that has, the mouth of the case will be very shiny. See that? So that's a quick indicator as to, you can tell if one's been trimmed or not just by the mouth. Now if the brass has sat in the tumbler or something after you trimmed, obviously it's not going to be easy to tell because the tumbling media might be on it. But again, you just insert it in, insert the pilot a little bit, and trim. Now I already have this trimmer set to the desired length, the 1.275. As far as trim length, you can be a little bit underneath that length as long as you're not over that length. And you don't want to be a lot under, but I mean, generally speaking, you can be a little bit under. I'll measure all these in a second and see what they look like. It's a very easy tool to use. I really like this trimmer. These are referred to as what they call lathe style trimmers. They make quick work of trimming brass. So now let's take a look and see what the lengths are. Remember, we needed 1.275. So I'll come and I'll check these. I'm going to use my calipers, turn them on, and I'm looking for 1.275. 1.269, so we're just under 1.27. So we're good on that one. And I'll check the rest of these. I don't know if you can see the numbers, but you just have to trust my judgment. 1.271, 1.272, 1.27, 1.272, 1.275. Whoa, that one's right on the money. So we have good trim lengths. Now at this point, I'm going to undo my trimmer and I'm going to put it back. That pop that you heard was my clamp. I clamped this down to the table. Put that back because what I need to do now is I need to deburr my case mouths, and I'm going to take this brush and I'm going to come into the mouths of the cases to kind of clean them. But I do the deburring step first. There's little burrs that happen to be on the outside of these cases. That happens when you trim them. It makes these little burrs. So you just give them a little tiny bit of deburring. You don't want to remove a lot of brass. You just want to give them a very mild deburr. You don't want to take a lot of material out of the inside of the case or the outside, because if you do, you'll actually affect your trim length. So you don't want to remove too much. Just a little bit, just enough to where your fingers roll on it and you don't feel them burrs. When you put the chamfering tool inside of the case mouth, right here, and you take a small amount of material out, what'll happen is it'll help those bullets seat a little bit better. Now on a rifle, if you're using a boat tail bullet, which is generally designed for longer distance shooting, versus a flat tail bullet, a boat tail bullet on a rifle seems to seat a little better than a flat bullet, flat bottom bullet. They're better for shorter distances. So there we have it. We've trimmed. Now we're going to take this brush. We're going to clean the mouths of the cases. Make sure there's no dirt, no tumbling media, nothing left inside, and that if there was any stuff like as far as brass shavings or anything inside, this step will help get rid of that too, because you don't want to be firing brass shavings downrange. So we're just getting rid of the stuff that might be inside the cases. If there's one thing that you should do when it comes to reloading, in my opinion, it's you should make sure that everything you do is clean. You know, as far as your brass, you know, everything that you're doing should be nice and clean. So there we have it. We have a good piece of brass that's trimmed to length. We've chamfered the mouth of the case inside and outside. We've deburred. We've knocked out the old primer, cleaned the primer pockets. Sometimes you can take a tool and clean these flash holes and uniform them, but I'm not going to go that far today. It's a tool that goes inside here and it uniforms the flash holes. I'm not going to do that today. Now I'm ready to put primers in. So I'm going to use the Lee autoprime tool. I have 6 cases here. Basically going to open my tool and I'm going to take some primers. I'll just take a row of 10, dump them into my hand, and I'll take my tray here and I'll set them in there. Now you notice they're not all oriented the same way. Like these all have the anvil up and these are anvil down. That's what these rings are for, these little circles, because if I shake this tray a little bit, it'll catch the anvils on them and it'll flip them all so that they orientate, I think that's the right word, so that they're all oriented the correct way with the anvil out. So again, that's what those grooves are for. From here, I'm going to put my lid on, close it, And you notice, I don't know if you can see this or not because the lighting, let me get a flashlight here. There's a primer inside there, anvil out, ready to go. See that? If I push this handle, see the primer coming up a little bit. So I'm basically going to insert the cases into my priming tool. Make sure the mouth of the case is not faced at you, not faced up at my face. I'm looking down on it. Make sure that this is faced in a safe direction, and I'm just going to gently push with my thumbs. This will seat the primer. You want to feel at this point, when you're pushing with your thumbs to seat the primers, you want to make sure that you don't feel them go in too easy. If you do, I'd recommend discarding that brass. You want them to go in with a mild bit of tension. You want to make sure that your brass is holding those primers well. From here, I'd recommend looking at your primer depth, your primer seating depth, and it should be lower than the outside area of this case. So just slightly recessed your primer. You don't want your primer bulging out past this area. So again, repeat. So I'm going to prime all 6 of these, filling them with my finger, because you'll be able to tell if they're recessed just by putting your finger on them. You can feel it. And as you can tell by my videos, I'm not the kind of person that gets in a big hurry. I take my time on everything. This one had a very good seat. It's actually really nice. They all did, but this one's really good. You can see the primers below this rim of the case. So that's the priming step. Okay, now we're ready for the priming step. What I have right now is I have my bowl sitting on my scale, and I'm going to turn on the scale. And what's going to happen is the scale will automatically zero to whatever's sitting on it. I'm going to kill this overhead light. Maybe it'll help with the view a little bit better. Maybe you can see the numbers on the scale a little bit better. Oh yeah, that's much nicer. I know it's kind of a dark picture, but looks a little better. So again, we're looking at our cheat sheet here, and we want to verify our powder charge again, 12 grains. So I'm going to use my scoop, and I'm going to put 12 grains of powder in this bowl. Went a little bit over, but we're still within the safe zone, so we'll be good. If you want to get another measurement, just lift the bowl and it'll remeasure the charge. So I'll put a few more flakes in. So 12.0. Take my funnel. Take the powder, put the powder in. Now you notice there's a few granules of powder still stuck in my bowl there. Time for the dryer sheet again. Turn the scale off too, because I'm going to want to recalibrate back to this, so hopefully this powder won't stick. So let's put the bowl back on and let's check our powder, or excuse me, make sure we're not going to stick, hopefully. $12 grains. Looks good. Take the bowl. Now let's see if our dryer sheet helped. Hopefully. Yep. Got all the powder in there. .4, a little hot. .12 grains. Now let's do a little test here. We know that that powder charge is 12 grains. 11.9, 12.0, right? So let's do this. Let's turn the scale off. We'll insert a piece of brass and we'll zero the scale to that brass. Then we'll take that piece of brass with our funnel. This is just another technique you could use. Put our charge in there. Put the bowl aside. Funnel aside. And measure 12.2. So we're still okay. Now if you put the bowl on, look what happens. 8.5 difference. That means the bowl is heavier than the brass. So we'll verify that bowl again. Another thing I want to show you, and let me move this powder out of the way to show you this, is if you have any kind of fan or anything going on in your reloading area, be careful. I'd recommend turning those exhaust vents and fans and things off, because any kind of blowing or anything around the scale really can affect that scale. Now watch the numbers. Didn't mean to spit on it, but you get the point, right? Any kind of wind could definitely affect your powder charge. So especially on handgun, you don't want to be off by, you know, rifle has a little more room for variance, but pistol don't. I mean, we're talking 1.6 grains of variance that we have. I'll explain what I mean by that here in a second. Basically from 12 to 13.6. That gives us 1.6 variance. From 12 grains to 13.6, that's 1.6. And on a rifle cartridge you might have something like 23 up to 30 or something. You know, you might have a lot more variance. But handguns for the most part don't have as much room for error. Another thing you want to do, and this sounds funny, but smell your powder before you use it. It has a distinct smell that it carries when it's still good. When your powder's starting to lose its life, the smell will change, and it won't. You'll. I don't know how to explain what that smells like. It's almost a sour smell or something. I don't know, but you can definitely tell when you have good powder, or when your powder needs, you know, you need new powder. I'm just tapping this scoop just kind of like a little trickle. And you could definitely purchase a trickler. I think Rcbs makes a real nice one. And by all means, I'm not biased to anybody. I mean, there's some stuff that I like that's Hornady, and there's some stuff that I like that's Rcbs, and some Redding and Lee and everything else. I have a mix of everything. But my personal opinion, Rcbs makes the best trickler. So this concludes the powder step, and there's one more thing I'd like to show you before we seat bullets. So I'm taking this camera on hand, and let me find my flashlight. And what you want to do is you want to shine a little light down in there, and you want to verify your powder levels against each other. Just want to make sure that nothing's low, nothing's high, because our next step is seating them bullets, and we don't want a case that's half charged or double charged or anything like that. So that's the powder step. Next time you see me, we're going to be seating some bullets. Okay, now it's time for us to take these 6 bullets and these 6 charged cases and seat the bullets. Again, I want to double, triple, quadruple check my powder charge, so I'm going to use my flashlight and I'm going to shine down into the case mouths and just again verify the powder. And what I'm really looking for is that the powder level is uniform between all the cases, and it doesn't take that long, and it's a very good step to get in the habit of. It's a good habit. So now I need to remove the case mouth expansion die, and I'm going to insert the bullet seating / crimp die. So what I want to do is I want to take one of the charged cases and I want to raise the ram all the way up, and I want to lower the die body down, this part, until it comes in contact with the case. You'll feel it touch the top of the case. Once you feel it touch the case, we're getting close, you want to back the die back about a half of a turn and lock the lock ring. And the reason we're backing it back a half of a turn is to take away the crimp feature on the die, because we're not ready to crimp yet. We want to seat bullets and then we'll crimp. So we're going to insert the bullet into a charged case. We're going to raise the ram, and what I want to do, because this bullet seating stem is so high, I want to lower the bullet seating stem until I feel it touch the top of the bullet. There we go, we touched. Now I'm going to lower the ram. I'm going to look at the top of the case mouth in relation to the cantilever and how far that distance is. That distance tells me approximately how many turns or how far I'm going to need to adjust my die. So I'm going to guess that we need about 2.5 turns. 1, that's actually a half plus a half, so there's 1. Another half, there's 2, and let's go another half a turn. Raise the ram. Now the adjustments that you'll make on your dies are different than what mine will be, so you'll have to kind of get a feel for your dies. What, you know, I know that I can go about 2.5 turns. I've loaded 44 mag many times. Now I'm going to look again at the case mouth and the distance to the cantilever. Let me take this case out and I'll show you. I'll have to hold it here for a second and let the camera adjust. We still have a ways to go. So I'm going to go in or downward another 1 turn. There's a half, there's 1. Raise the ram, seat the bullet. Still a little short, let's go a half a turn. The closer you get to the desired overall length, the smaller the increments you need to make on your bullet seating stem. And the same thing goes with the crimp. Let's go 1 more half. We're still short. Now we're getting close. Once we get to this point where we're starting to get close, let me let the camera focus here. We're starting to get close. This is the point where I start to try to take my measurements with my calipers. And again, let's remind ourselves, the overall length that we're looking for is 1.610. Take the calipers and let's check our length here. What we're looking for is 1.610. We're going to be a little bit long, I think. 1.6125. Very close, 1.6130. So we're very, very close. Now when it comes to overall length, that's really the max that you should be. If you fall a little bit under that length, that's okay. So if your bullet's a little bit short, that's okay. So we went a quarter turn. Let's go 1/8 of a turn. Actually, excuse me, 1/4 of a turn. There's 1/4 right there. It'd help if I put my bullet in, wouldn't it? Put the bullet in, raise the ram. Let's check our length again. .60.5. So we're right on the money as far as the length is concerned. Okay, so I'm not going to lock this bullet seating stem lock ring because I have to establish the second feature of the die, which is the actual crimp feature of the die. So at this point I'm going to back out the bullet seating stem all the way again. Counterclockwise, we're raising it up. Because what my objective is now is to put a nice crimp on the bullet. And what I mean by crimp is if this was the case itself, I want the top of the case to bend inward into the cantilever. And the cantilever again is this grooved area of the bullet. That's what we refer to as a cantilever. So I've raised the seating stem all the way out. Now I'm going to insert the case into the die, or excuse me, the bullet into the press, unlock the die lock ring. I'm going to go up with the die lock ring and I'm going to raise the ram and I'm going to lower the die body again until I feel it touch the case. Until it's nice and till it stops basically. From there, once it stops, I lower the ram and let's go a quarter of a turn, raise the ram, and let's inspect the cartridge. I have zero crimp right now. And let me take a crimped bullet and I'll show you the difference between a zero crimp and a crimped bullet. So bear with me, let me find one that looks nice. So I have two bullets in my hand here. This one here does not have a crimp on it. This one does. Now as I move them very slowly, you'll notice this one, the case kind of bites into the cantilever a little bit. I hope you can see that. This one you can notice it has a lot more air space and stuff. Let me take you and show you another example of a good crimped one. Here's another one that's been crimped well. This one. So you see how the case kind of rolls at the top end of the cantilever? That's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to establish that nice crimp. So let's go. We didn't get enough crimp on this case. Let's go another quarter turn. Small increments, okay? It's just like when you seat bullets and you get to that final step where you're almost there. You got to make those adjustments small. Same thing. Let's go another quarter. Raise the ram. Give it a little bump. Now that looks nice. See how it's biting into the cantilever? So this bullet is done as far as the settings. I have the correct bullet seating depth and I have the correct crimp. So now I'm going to raise the ram, and the reason I did that is so it stops this stuff from turning the die, and I'm going to go ahead and lock the die lock ring, and that will lock in the crimp setting for this bullet. I'm also going to lower the bullet seating stem until we touch the top of the bullet, and I'm going to lock that small bullet seating stem lock nut. Okay, so I'm just touching. Let's lock that little lock nut. Now when you lock your lock nuts, make sure that your bullet seating stem's not turning as you lock the lock nut. So I like to hold my bullet seating stem and slowly lock the lock nut. From here, we've basically copied this bullet, and now again I'm going to verify my powder charge, put the case into the press, take a new bullet, and now this die is set. It should do two functions in one stroke. It should properly seat the bullet depth, and it should also put a good crimp on the bullet, all in one motion. See? Looks beautiful. Let's check it for length, because the first one that you do after you make those adjustments and get the dies locked down, the first one you always need to check it to make sure your bullet seating depth and everything is still good. 1.599. That is perfect. We have another charged case, another bullet. Raise the ram and crimp it. Let's take a look, check our length. .607. Perfect. So at this point, if we had like 50 cases left, we would just go through them all and just seat those bullets. So I'll zoom in a little bit and show you the rest of the process, and we're almost done with this step. I can't stress it enough, you have to verify your powder charge before you seat any bullets. Gotta do that step. You can't miss that step. Have to do it. I've seen videos where people were so busy talking to the camera that they weren't verifying their powder charge, and they have actually knocked some of the brass over that had bullets in, or excuse me, powder, and they knocked their charge out and didn't even know it, and they were seating bullets on top of a case that didn't even have a charge. So please make sure you take that split second to verify that you have good powder. Boy, that's a beautiful bullet. 44 mag with the cantilever. Everything's got a nice crimp. The seating depth is beautiful. I hope you enjoy this video. Next step is the final inspection. We'll see you there. Thanks for watching. Okay, we're back. We have the bullets that we just made, and generally what I would do at this point is I would get a case length gauge, and for example I'm holding the 2231, and I would insert the case that I just charged into the case length gauge, and I would check the length of the brass, and I would also check for the headspace. But in our case today, I don't have a headspace gauge for 44 mag. So let me step over here for a second. I'll turn the overhead light back on, and I'll show you what I use for my 44s and for my 45 Colt. And that is, I take the cylinder out of the weapon that I'm going to be using, and I use it like a case length gauge. I just insert them in. If your crimp is correct and everything is correct, they'll just fall right in, nice and loose, and that's what you want. You don't want them coming in real hard and having a hard time going in. I'm also checking all my primers, making sure that they're seated below flush, checking if I hold these here and flip it over, checking to make sure that I don't have excessive lengths of anything coming out. And while I'm talking about that, when it comes to revolvers, the cylinder here houses the rounds, and trimming the brass on like a 357 mag, 38 special, 44 special, 44 mag in our case today, a lot of the revolver cartridges, it's not real important to crimp, or excuse me, to trim your brass. But the reason I do it is because I like the cantilever to come in line with the crimp and everything else. So I trim for that reason. But because I trimmed today, the brass probably won't need trimmed for the next few firings. So another thing you want to verify is that they fall out easily without any kind of effort. You want them to go in easy and you want them to come out easy. If they do that, then your crimp is good and your bullets are good. So there are my 644 mag bullets. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found some good useful information in it. And if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, feel free. And last but not least, I'm going to write down today's date on this piece of paper. And I'm also going to write trimmed brass. So I have all my specs on this piece of paper, and that will go with those bullets, so that no matter where they are or who's looking at them, they'll know exactly what they are. And this concludes my video for 44 Magnum. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks guys. Bye.